Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great season. My name is Dennie, and I'm going to do a presentation on injury stoppages during wrestling. I created a flow chart that breaks down the different types of injuries and how we as referees handle each type of injury and the steps and procedures that follow the rule book and how to handle these situations. A couple of terms that we're going to use throughout the presentation. The first one, appropriate healthcare professional, or AHCP. This is a person who carries a credential or is certified to diagnose or treat athletes and injuries. Some examples of this type of person will be a certified athletic trainer or a doctor that is working for the school or working for the event or the dual match that you're refereeing. They are the only person who can request the HNC extension of time. A coach cannot request it. A referee cannot request it. And after their diagnosis of the athlete, their decision cannot be overruled. If they determine that the wrestler cannot continue, that would be the end of the match. If they do determine that the wrestler can continue, the wrestler can still be withdrawn by the coach. We also have head, neck, cervical injury, or HNC. Again, this is any injury involving the head, neck, or cervical column. These are the types of injuries that we see as a result of maybe awkward situations or awkward positions, sometimes from hard returns to the mat or slams. One of the things that can help out our situation is if the head official makes contact with the AHCP prior to the event. A lot of our trainers, doctors may not know the sport of wrestling like we do, and they may not know about our protocols and timing involved with injuries. Many other sports that they may cover don't have time limits on injury. For example, a football player down on the field can be down for a long time depending on what's wrong with him. Whereas in wrestling, we have time limits that we have to follow, and whoever's covering the event as far as AHCP may not be familiar with that, and it's a good thing for the head official to go over that with them. Another thing that the head official can do is inform the rest of his crew of the location and name of the trainer. That really helps when, again, with the timing situation, if we can get to the trainer and get them to our mat quickly to help the athlete out in a injury situation. You can also inform them that we don't have a AHCP available for the event. You know, a lot of times during the middle of the week, whether it be maybe a middle school event or a high school event, there may not be any trainer available. Maybe the school only has one trainer and they are on the road with the basketball team, or for whatever reason you don't have one. So you can inform your crew and or partner, if you're doing a dual match with an assistant, that you do not have a AHCP available. Also, it's a good smart thing to go over the injury protocols with the crew before the tournament. So here's a look at the flow chart. It all starts with two things. Do I have a AHCP available, and what type of injury do I have? Okay. So you should know ahead of time whether you have a certified person there or not. Then it just depends on what type of injury do we have. Okay. And we're going to break down each one of these tiers of this thing. But we're going to start out with, what type of injury do I have? Is it a injury that just requires injury time? Was it a head, neck, and cervical situation? Do we have blood time? Was it an illegal move that caused the injury? And then we go from there. The first type of injury timeout we're going to talk about is your basic injury time. Non-HNC occurs from legal wrestling. This is your injury to the knee, to the ankle, maybe even a shoulder, but it does not involve a head, neck, or cervical part to it. You're allowed 2 injury timeouts that do not cumulatively go over 1 minute and 30 seconds. On the second injury timeout, the opponent gets their choice of position. If they take a third injury timeout, they are defaulting the match. Or if they run out of injury time at 1 minute and 30 seconds and cannot immediately continue, they default the match. And it's vital that your table help records all injuries and the amount of time used, so that if you have, say, an injury in the first period and then not another one until the last 30 seconds of the third period, well, that becomes vital that you remember that one that happened in the first period, so the opponent gets their choice of position. And then it's also important that you allow the coach to know how much injury time they used and how much injury time they have remaining. Very oftentimes, I will take the stopwatch out onto the mat with me so the coach can visually see how much time has elapsed. And they know how much time they have remaining. I usually will tell them they've used 1 minute or they have 30 seconds remaining. Let's talk about HNC time. We're going to be referring to the left side of the flow chart. In this situation, we have an AHC present at the event. The referee would start the 1 minute and 30 second injury time. After the appropriate healthcare professional arrives, they request to have extended time to examine the wrestler. The injury time is recorded at this point, and it counts as the first injury timeout. Then H&C can be continued up to the 5 minute mark. Once the wrestler is cleared to continue, any remaining injury time is still available for a subsequent non-HNC second injury time. Only one HNC injury time is granted to a wrestler during a match, because if the second injury occurs to the HNC area, the wrestler must default the match. So let's take it out to an example. Wrestler A injures his neck and the referee starts the injury time. At the 20-second mark, the trainer asks for extended time to assess wrestler A. The referee would then instruct the scorer to record 20 seconds to the first injury timeout, as the clock continues to run with the remainder of the 5 minutes available to the HNC extended time. So, at the time of the end of the 5 minutes, the trainer determines that the wrestler may continue. That would leave a remaining 1 minute and 10 seconds for a second injury timeout if needed. Remember, if the second injury timeout is an HNC, it would be a default. Also remember that if the wrestler takes another injury timeout, even if it's non-HNC, his opponent would get choice because that would be his second injury timeout of the match. Here is the signal for HNC time. This allows the crowd, the scorers, and the other coaches to know that you are using an extended timeout as requested by the appropriate healthcare professional. Our second type of HNC time involves when you have no AHCP present. It's treated the same as a regular injury time. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds of time. When the time is used up, you would either continue or default the match as the wrestler. You immediately have to begin wrestling. You do not get extra time. If there is a second HNC occurrence that results, the wrestler must default the match. You as the official have your concussion training, and you should use common sense as the official, because you have the ultimate say as whether the match continues or not. One common thing to think of is, what if it was your child out there? Would you want them to continue wrestling in this state? We're now going to talk about recovery time. We're going to be referring to the right side of the flow chart. We use recovery time when we have an injury that's a result of an illegal move, unnecessary roughness, unsportsmanlike conduct, or a false start contact from the neutral position. Recovery time is 2 minutes long. You cannot follow it with an injury timeout, nor is it deducted or counted as an injury timeout. And if the coach wants to default the match, the coach of the injured wrestler wants to default the match, he has to do this prior to the 2 minutes expiring off the clock. He cannot wait until the time is out and then restart the match to default. If he cannot continue at the end of the 2 minutes, he would be declared the winner by disqualification. So now let's talk about blood time. It is not on the flow chart, but it is a stoppage during the match. We have 5 minutes of blood time in wrestling with unlimited stoppages. Blood time takes precedent over injury time. What that means is if you have a wrestler on an injury timeout and notice they are bleeding, you would stop the injury time and start the blood clock and put them on blood time. In the same concept, if you have one wrestler on an injury time and notice the other wrestler is bleeding, you would stop injury time and start blood time on the other wrestler. Once the 5 minutes of blood time expires, it cannot be followed with an injury timeout. The opponent would be declared the winner of the match. Also, blood time cannot be followed with recovery time. If the bleeding was due to an occurrence from an illegal move, unsportsmanlike conduct, or unnecessary roughness, and the offended wrestler's blood time expires, the offended wrestler is declared the winner by disqualification. It is possible to have both wrestlers on blood time at the same time. It's also possible for a wrestler to go from injury time to blood time and back on injury time. But remember, this would only be considered one injury timeout for that wrestler. So now that we've covered the different types of injuries and the ways we would handle those situations, just some basic reminders on injury mechanics. Make sure you know your injury signals because that tells the table workers and the crowd what type of injury you have. You want to stay near the middle of the mat or near the injured wrestler. It looks bad if you end up talking to the other wrestler or the other coach while their opponent is injured. You only want to answer questions asked from medical personnel. You want to remain quiet and let people do their jobs. And if they ask you what you saw, you simply tell them. Don't elaborate. Remember to keep the stopwatch in view of the coach, especially during an injury timeout. Make sure that the other wrestler stays in the large circle. They can have water, but they have to remain inside the circle. Coaching is allowed during all timeouts. Remember your concussion training, especially in a situation where you do not have the appropriate healthcare professional at the event. You have to make sure that all timeouts and time used are recorded at the table. Because as we get deep into a match, a lot of this could come around for choices or amount of time left. Remember to be aware of the presence of the appropriate healthcare professional, whether they are there or whether they are not there at the event. Also, make sure you know the name and location of the trainer. Because again, our sport has time limits on injuries. Therefore, the quicker we can get the certified person to our mat to treat the athlete, we are going to save them time on their clock so they can make a decision whether they can continue or not. Finally, here are some considerations to use when you are reviewing this concept of injury timeouts. We do have the imminent point situation, both in the situation where we have already met criteria and when we have a situation new this year where we think criteria was going to be met. Remember to keep up with your concussion training. It's every 3 years. You can log on to your My OHSAA account and see your expiration date for your current certification. If you are in need of updating your certification, the link is right there where your certification expiration date is, and it is free. Remember that potentially dangerous situations can prevent injuries if you catch them, so be vigilant in your refereeing and know the situations where injuries are likely to occur. And always review your rulebook, casebook, and green book. These are the pages where you can find information on these topics, and page 43 is the flow chart in the green book. I hope all of you are having a great season, and I hope all of you continue to have a great remainder of the season as we get ready to go into sectionals, districts, and the state tournament. Thank you for your time.